The Yakuza 3 scandal is a controversy nobody saw coming. Sega has finally unveiled Yakuza Kiwami 3, the long-awaited remake of one of the series' most heartfelt chapters, and within minutes, the internet did what it does best. It imploded. What should have been a moment of celebration, a triumphant return to Okinawa, polished visuals, and a renewed chance to walk in Kiryu's shoes, instead became something far darker. Before anyone could talk about the all-new cutscenes, every conversation turned to one man. Teruyuki Kagawa, the newly cast actor behind Go Hamazaki. Almost overnight, the hashtag #RemoveKagawa began spreading across Japanese and Western social media alike. Accusations surfaced, screenshots circulated, and petitions appeared demanding that Sega erase him from the game entirely. But who is Teruyuki Kagawa? What exactly did he do to spark this outrage, and why has a remake meant to celebrate loyalty and redemption become a battleground for moral outrage and cultural contradiction? Well, let me explore and answer these questions for you today. I am Lady Decade, and if you like spicy gaming controversies, then hit subscribe, because this is why Yakuza Kiwami 3 is causing outrage. The modern Sega brand isn't exactly the powerhouse it once was in the early 90s. The blue blur is no longer leading the console wars, and the days of Dreamcasts flying off shelves are long gone. Yet, if there's one thing Sega has truly mastered in recent years, it's the art of storytelling through the Yakuza series. In a gaming landscape dominated by bloated open worlds and soulless live service experiments, Yakuza has remained a rare constant. Grounded, character-driven, and unapologetically Japanese. Across the last couple of decades, Sega has turned what was once a niche curiosity into one of the most consistent, emotionally resonant franchises in gaming history. Each release has refined its formula without losing heart. Part gritty crime drama, part absurdist comedy, and part heartfelt exploration of masculinity, loyalty, and redemption. It's a series that manages to make players cry one moment and laugh the next, a tonal tightrope few studios could ever hope to walk. In many ways, Yakuza has become Sega's beating heart, and one thing that still carries the same emotional weight, ambition, and creativity that once defined the company's golden age. What's even better is that right now is the perfect time to dive into the Yakuza series, and I can help you do it for a fraction of the price. If you've never played before, start at the beginning with Yakuza 0, the ultimate introduction into the series world of loyalty, chaos, and karaoke. And through my link, you can grab it for a massive 43% off, or maybe you fancy something a little more absurd. A turn-based crime epic that's half JRPG and half fever dream, then Like a Dragon is your game. It's where I first jumped in, and I've been hooked ever since, and you can currently get it for an incredible 64% off. And if you want something completely different, a swashbuckling gangster adventure that puts both Microsoft and Ubisoft's pirate games to shame, then Pirate Yakuza, set in sun-soaked Hawaii, is the one for you. You can pick up any of these or thousands of other games with huge discounts through my links below. Treat yourself, save some money, and enjoy the rest of this video. For longtime fans, Yakuza Kiwami 3 was meant to be a homecoming, the long-awaited restoration of one of the most emotionally resonant chapters in the entire series. In theory, it should have been an uncomplicated celebration of how far both the franchise and its fans had come. For those who had followed Kiryu's journey since the PlayStation 2 days, this was supposed to be the victory lap, the reward for 2 decades of loyalty and endurance. But of course, in 2025, innocence rarely survives the news cycle. Within hours of the announcement, excitement soared into moral panic. Twitter threads morphed into digital tribunals, and gaming outlets rushed to reframe the remake not as a technical achievement but as a moral scandal, with the conversation shifting from how good the remake looked to how bad a person one of the actors apparently is. Teruyuki Kagawa, whose likeness and voice will be featured in the game, isn't some disposable background actor or bit part performer. He's one of Japan's most decorated and recognizable faces. For decades, decades, he was a fixture across prestige television dramas, art house cinema, and prime-time entertainment. He was a kind of actor who could be cast in anything and the audience would instinctively trust the production. Respected, reliable, safe. Well, at least that's how it used to be until it all came tumbling down around him. In 2019, his reputation collapsed. Reports began emerging from Tokyo's Ginza district, specifically from a high-end hostess club, where Kagawa was accused of groping and assaulting a woman during a private party. Witnesses described a scene both graphic and humiliating, and multiple staff members later corroborated their accounts. While heavily intoxicated at a high-end hostess bar, Kagawa was reported to have groped a female hostess's breasts, pulled off her bra, then passed it around to others in the venue before allegedly forcing her to kiss him. Witnesses described him as being visibly drunk and behaving inappropriately throughout the evening. The woman later filed a civil lawsuit against the bar's management, not Kagawa himself, arguing that staff failed to intervene. The case was eventually settled and withdrawn, and no criminal charges were brought. The story first broke in Shukan Shincho and was later expanded upon by Daily Shincho, both respected publications with long histories of investigative reporting. Kagawa's agency later issued a public apology, with Kagawa himself admitting to indecent acts and attributing his behaviour to excessive drinking that night. The apology, however, was not enough for everyone, and many within the industry criticised it as a hollow, carefully managed attempt at image control rather than a sincere act of remorse. Worse still was the revelation that a second victim came forward, the mama of the club, who received no apology whatsoever, but rather legal intimidation instead. So, to make the facts abundantly clear, no criminal charges were ever filed, and there was no formal conviction, but with Kagawa himself publicly admitting to his inappropriate behaviour, the consequences were immediate. His television contracts were terminated, his commercials were pulled, and his long-standing public image disintegrated almost overnight. So when Sega decided to cast him in their upcoming release, you can see why it is ruffling a lot of feathers online. You know, it's easy to forget sometimes just how good Sega once was at capturing pure gaming joy. The Saturn and Dreamcast were playgrounds for creativity, bursting with bold experiments and unforgettable charm. And if all this modern gaming drama has you feeling a bit worn out, I've got the remedy. Head over to my other channel, Lady Arcade, where I cover that exact golden era, deep dives into the Saturn, Dreamcast and games that made Sega a legend. It's nostalgia without the noise, a reminder of when gaming was about heart, not hashtags. So if you want more pure-hearted content, subscribe and head over to that channel after this video and say hello in the comment section. After the massive 2019 controversy, Teruyuki Kagawa began doing what the Yakuza series itself so often preaches. Quietly and steadily, he began to atone. In 2022, he remarried, became a father, and gave up drinking, retreating from public life to focus on his family. There was no press conferences or tearful television appearances, and no redemption tours designed to rehabilitate an image. Just the quiet, unglamorous work of a man trying, however imperfectly, to rebuild what he had broken. But for many, it seems that none of this is actually enough, and they want him cancelled from the public eye for good. They are calling for his complete removal from the game and seem to want him to suffer for what he has done for eternity. They believe that once certain lines are crossed, that no amount of humility can ever rewrite the past. In a franchise built entirely on the idea of redemption, loyalty, and the slow climb back from disgrace, that irony cuts particularly deep. The stories in the games are literally about very bad people trying to do better and make up for their past indiscretions, but in real life it seems that many people who claim to enjoy these titles have missed the entire message of the series completely. Kagawa's post-scandal years have been defined not by denial but by deliberate withdrawal, a kind of quiet self-imposed exile that stands in sharp contrast to the hysteria now surrounding him. He didn't fight the backlash, nor did he try to rewrite the narrative. He simply stepped back, accepted the consequences and tried to rebuild his life outside the spotlight. And Yet here we are. Years later, his very attempt to move on is being treated as an act of defiance. It raises an uncomfortable question. In the eyes of the modern internet, is redemption even possible anymore? Can a person who acknowledges their mistakes ever truly be allowed to move forward, or has public punishment become a lifelong sentence with no chance of parole? Regardless of whether or not you believe people should face consequences for their wrongdoings indefinitely, here's where things become more complicated and, if we're being honest, fascinating. Because while many saw Kagawa's casting as a moral failure on Sega's part, others quietly wondered whether that was precisely why he suited the role so perfectly. There has always been a strange, almost primal magnetism to performances that draw their power from lived experience, from actors who have looked into the abyss, felt its heat, and come back changed. Audiences, whether they admit it or not, respond to that kind of authenticity, the rawness that can't be faked, the weight of someone who knows what it means to fall. In Britain, we've had no shortage of examples. Leslie Grantham, immortalised as Dirty Den in EastEnders, was a convicted murderer, yet became one of the most beloved soap icons in television history. Lenny McLean, the legendary bare-knuckle brawler, brought a genuine, unteachable menace to Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. Across the Atlantic, Danny Trejo turned a prison sentence into a decades-long Hollywood career. Mark Wahlberg evolved from a street thug to a global celebrity, and Tom Sizemore, for all his demons, delivered performances so raw they often felt like a confession rather than acting. There is something undeniably powerful about watching someone who has stood on the edge of ruin channel that energy into their art. It's the kind of truth that you can't rehearse, the grit that drama schools try to simulate, the texture that method actors spend careers chasing, is something life itself has already taught them, brutally and without a script. But it seems for some who watch modern entertainment, they have grown allergic to moral complexity. The instinct now is to sanitise, to make every production spotless and every performer ideologically pristine. It's a kind of creative sterilisation disguised as progress, art that looks immaculate on paper but feels hollow on screen. Safer, yeah, but stripped of tension and humanity and truth. So when calling for Kagawa's removal, it's worth asking, do we actually want art that feels authentic, or art that flatters our conscience? Because if Yakuza is, at its heart, a story about flawed men seeking redemption, about honour and atonement and the slow, painful climb towards forgiveness, then shouldn't that idea extend beyond the screen? Isn't that the very soul of the series, that people can fall and pay their debts and still find meaning in what comes after? The uncomfortable truth is that Teruyuki Kagawa, playing a morally compromised character, offers up poetic symmetry. The only real question is whether we, as an audience, can accept that redemption in fiction means nothing if we refuse to recognise it in reality. But no matter whether you think it was the right or wrong decision to let this man play a villain in this game, there is another factor at play too that desperately needs addressing in this tale. The fact of the matter is that by the time the Kagawa story resurfaced, many Yakuza fans were already seething. Long before the moral panic began, Kiwami 3 had managed to spark a very different kind of outrage, one rooted not in ethics but in aesthetics. To some, the early screenshots of the new game simply didn't look right. Characters who once radiated warmth, grit and regional charm suddenly appeared unnervingly sterile, their faces smoothed, their expressions subdued, their individuality replaced by a kind of algorithmic blandness. Voices that fans had come to associate with beloved performances, so Rukia Shimabukuro, Shigeru Nakahara and even George Takahashi, the original voice of Go Hamazaki, were recast without clear explanation. There was a growing discontent as fans flooded comment sections demanding answers. Some assumed licensing complications, others suspected something more deliberate. A quiet attempt at sanitization. In fact, on Reddit and Japanese message boards, the frustration ran even deeper than just missing faces and voices. They believed the makeover included the erasure of cultural identity. The Okinawan setting of Yakuza 3 had always been one of the series' most distinctive qualities, a vivid, sun-drenched counterpoint to the dense neon sprawl of Kamurocho. The tropical shirts, the laid-back dialect, even the rhythm of the dialogue made it unmistakably Okinawan. Yet the remake's aesthetic choices seemed to bleach that uniqueness away and traded texture for polish and personality for homogeneity. One of the most hotly debated changes centered on Hamazaki's shirt, once a bold, vivid red, widely believed to be a homage to Kateshi Kitano's Sonatine, now recolored into a muted green. The original red design was later tucked behind a paywalled DLC pack, a move that many fans found insulting. For a franchise that's built its reputation on honour, authenticity and cultural specificity, it felt like a tone-deaf decision, a betrayal disguised as an upgrade. As one translated comment from Japan that went viral on social media put it, "They say it's about respect, but they've deleted everything that's made this game feel like Okinawa." By now it's clear that Sega's remake isn't being seen as preservation at all, but a complete revision of the previous experience. A corporate repainting, a sanitised restoration that scrubbed away the imperfections and the rough edges, and the human fingerprints that once gave Yakuza 3 its soul. And when you have a fan base that has spent 2 decades celebrating loyalty, legacy and honour, that kind of meddling, of course, can feel personal. So when the announcement came that the newly redesigned Hamazaki would be voiced and modelled after a disgraced actor, it wasn't merely a spark, it was the sound of a full can of petrol being poured onto an already blazing fire. So no wonder there's so much outrage surrounding this entire situation. To long-time fans, none of this is just about an actor or a casting decision, it's about trust. The Yakuza series has always prided itself on authenticity, on portraying flawed men trying to do the right thing in a world that rarely rewards them for it, and none of this is merely a question of optics. It's a clash between art and morality, fiction and reality, and the messy space where those two collide. Whenever a scandal like this erupts, the internet does what it always does. It transforms into judge, jury and public executioner before most people have even finished their morning coffee. The Yakuza Kiwami 3 controversy followed the script perfectly. A handful of resurfaced headlines and moral accusations snowballed into a global referendum on decency. Sega's PR department suddenly found itself standing in the crossfire between moral absolutists and exhausted onlookers. There's an important distinction that tends to disappear the moment social media lights its torches: the difference between mob justice and market consequence. Mob justice is never right. It's the digital guillotine, impulsive and vindictive and fueled by the thrill of collective punishment rather than a search for truth. It turns outrage into entertainment and ruins lives long before facts ever surface. Market consequence, however, is something entirely different. It's how accountability should work. If people genuinely disagree with Sega's decision to cast Teruyuki Kagawa, they can simply choose not to buy the game. That isn't censorship or cruelty, it's the natural course of consumer choice, where actions speak louder than hashtags and punishment comes from principle, not pitchforks. The hashtag Remove Kagawa petition illustrates this divide perfectly. As of late 2025, it has gathered over 8,000 signatures, hardly a cultural revolution, but enough to dominate the headlines as signal to Sega that the controversy isn't fading quietly. In an age where perception spreads faster than facts, that's often all it takes for a project to become radioactive. And yet this is precisely where nuance tends to die. You can oppose cancel culture, the mob mentality, the moral posturing, the gleeful destruction of careers, and still believe in accountability. The two ideas are not contradictory, they occupy the same moral space. Because at the heart of this debate isn't merely the question of whether individuals deserve to work again, it's whether corporations deserve to decide what redemption looks like, whether rehabilitation is a human process or just another brand liability to be managed by risk analysts and PR consultants. And this is where Sega's hypocrisy becomes impossible to ignore, because there is another factor in this situation that has irked people. Sega are, after all, the same company that immediately recast Pierre Taki in Judgment the moment allegations of cocaine possession surfaced, allegations that led to a criminal conviction and public disgrace. By contrast, the case involving Teruyuki Kagawa was a civil matter, not criminal, and was filed against the hostess bar where the incident took place rather than Kagawa himself. From a purely legal standpoint, Sega's differing responses make sense. One man was found guilty of a criminal offence, while the other was never prosecuted. Yet for many the issue isn't about legality but ethics. Fans see a company willing to draw a hard moral line over drugs, yet hesitant to do the same when the offence involves sexual misconduct. That contrast has fueled much of the anger, not because Sega broke any law, but because its moral consistency seems dictated more by convenience than conviction. After all the petitions, debates and digital outrage, we return to the question that began this entire story. What does redemption actually mean? It's a deceptively simple word, yet it forms the moral backbone of the Yakuza franchise, not as marketing fluff, but as its defining philosophy. Every chapter, from Kiryu's first steps out of prison to his quiet retreats from the underworld, has wrestled with the same dilemma. Can men who have done unforgivable things ever truly find peace? For 2 decades, Yakuza has preached that even the most broken people can claw their way back towards decency, that loyalty, repentance and courage can outlast even the worst mistakes. It's a story that recognises morality not as performance but as process. Redemption in Yakuza has always been earned through deeds, not declarations, and through humility and not hashtags. In truth, this controversy was never really about Teruyuki Kagawa, it was about Sega, about whether the values they so elegantly dramatise in fiction still hold any weight when profit margins and public perception collide. If a man gives up drinking, remarries, becomes a father and quietly works to rebuild what he destroyed, does that not count as atonement? Or are we now in an age where punishment is expected to last forever, where rehabilitation is no longer a human process but an aesthetic gesture, something acknowledged only when convenient? Don't forget that right now is the perfect time to dive into the Yakuza series, and I can help you do it for a fraction of the price. If you've never played before, start at the beginning with Yakuza 0, the ultimate introduction to the series' world of loyalty, chaos and karaoke, and through my link you can grab it for a massive 43% off. Or maybe you fancy something a little bit more absurd, a turn-based crime epic that's half JRPG and half fever dream, then Like a Dragon is your game. It's where I first jumped in and I've been hooked ever since, and you can currently get it for an incredible 64% off. And if you want something completely different, a swashbuckling gangster adventure that puts both Microsoft and Ubisoft's pirate games to shame, then Pirate Yakuza, set in sun-soaked Hawaii, is the one for you. You can pick up any of these or thousands of other games with huge discounts through my links below. Or, if you really enjoy what I do, gain access to my behind-the-scenes cosplay library and more by becoming a backer over on Patreon. I'll see you all again very soon.